Most people have given up on eggs, not because they don't eat them, because they can't cook them right. They sit down to what should be breakfast and get something rubbery, dry, and flat. The whites push back against your fork. The yolks lose their color before you even taste them. You figure it's just how eggs are when you cook them at home. It's not. It's a solved problem, and most people never got the memo. I'm going to give you that memo right now. The answer costs about $1 and sits in the spice aisle next to the cinnamon. Nobody talks about it because it doesn't sell anything. It just works. And I'm going to show you exactly how to use it, why it works on a physical level, and how hotels and restaurants have been using it for decades to make eggs that people remember and ask for again. If this kind of thing is useful to you, hit subscribe. I put out a new video every week on food techniques they don't put on labels. Things your grandmother knew, your grocery store doesn't want you to remember, and the food industry has every reason to keep buried. Before I go further, I want to hear from you. What's your egg problem? Rubbery whites, flat yolks, eggs that brown too fast, eggs that stick, something else entirely? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and I'll try to address your specific situation in videos to come. Let's start with why your eggs are rubbery in the first place. This matters because you can't fix a problem you don't understand, and most home cooks run into 3 problems at once, which compounds the damage. Problem 1 is heat. You crank the burner to medium high or higher, and you treat the pan like you're searing a steak. Eggs are delicate. The proteins in egg whites start to tighten and squeeze out moisture at around 140 degrees Fahrenheit. By 150 degrees, the proteins are well into the tightening phase. By 160 degrees, you're past the point of no return. The whites go rubbery because the proteins have contracted and welded themselves together in dense, tight networks. There's no recovery from that. You either pull them off in time, or you eat something that feels like a rubber stress ball with a yolk in the middle. Most home pans are running way hotter than that by the time you crack the eggs in. People heat the pan for 3 or 4 minutes, add oil or butter, and then crack eggs directly into that heat. The bottom of the egg sets immediately and the top is still raw. You compensate by turning up the heat or pressing on the eggs with a spatula, and now you're squeeze drying the proteins from below while the top is still liquid. That's how you get rubbery whites with a raw center. It's a structural problem caused by thermal inconsistency. Problem 2 is fat choice. A lot of people cook eggs in vegetable oil, canola oil, or some other neutral oil that has a high smoke point. That's fine if you want something slick and almost greaseless, but eggs need fat that carries flavor, and they need it to baste the eggs as they cook. Butter does something that oils don't. It emulsifies with the egg proteins and slows the moisture loss. It also adds milk solids that participate in the Maillard reaction. That's the browning and flavor development that makes properly cooked eggs taste like something instead of just having a texture. Oil can't do that. Neutral oils give you cooked protein. Butter gives you cooked protein that tastes like food. Problem 3 is timing and movement. Most people stir eggs constantly or they leave them untouched for too long. Both are wrong in different ways. Constant stirring breaks up curds into small, overcooked fragments that squeeze out moisture as they cook. Leaving them alone makes one flat slab that cooks unevenly. Overcooked on the bottom, undercooked in the middle, nothing in between. The right approach is gentle, periodic movement that lets curds form in soft, uneven shapes. More on that when I get to my specific method. Those 3 problems compound each other. High heat plus wrong fat plus bad timing equals the rubbery, gray, flat eggs that most people think are normal. They're not normal. They're just the result of guessing instead of knowing. Any cook who went through a kitchen brigade will tell you the same thing. They learned it by feel, by failure, and by watching someone competent cook eggs in front of them. I'm going to give you the shortcut so you don't have to burn through a dozen batches figuring it out. Now here is where the dollar powder comes in. Cream of tartar is a byproduct of winemaking. It's the crystalline acid that deposits on the inside of wine barrels during fermentation. It collects on the wood and gets scraped off and processed. It's been used in cooking for a long time, mostly in baking, to stabilize whipped egg whites in Mariques and angel food cakes. Almost nobody thinks about it for eggs beyond that. They should. What it does to egg whites is grounded in basic food chemistry, and it works better than anything else you can add to a white for this specific purpose. Egg white proteins are arranged in long chains that fold over themselves. They stay folded because the environment they're in has a certain pH, slightly alkaline, around 8 or 9. When you beat egg whites, you incorporate air, and the proteins stretch to wrap around the air bubbles. That's what creates the foam. But without help, those proteins are unstable after you stop beating. They relax, they release the air, and the foam collapses. That's why so many people beat egg whites to peaks, and then watch them weep and flatten within minutes. The foam is temporary by nature because the proteins don't hold their stretched position. Cream of tartar drops the pH. It adds acid. When you add even a small amount to egg whites before you beat them, it shifts the environment toward acidic, around 4.6 to 4.8. At that pH, the protein chains hold their shape more tightly. They don't relax as easily after stretching. They wrap around air bubbles and stay wrapped. The result is a foam that's lighter, fluffier, and structurally stable for much longer. It holds its volume through gentle folding, through mixing with yolks, through cooking. The acid basically locks the protein structure in its extended position so it can't contract back. This works because of how proteins behave at different pH levels. At high pH, egg white proteins carry a negative charge that causes them to repel each other. That repulsion makes them stretch out and float in the liquid, which is why they whip up so easily. But when you stop beating, the proteins settle and the charge distributes more evenly, and they contract. Lowering the pH with cream of tartar reduces the repulsion and keeps the proteins in a more stable configuration. They stay where they are. The foam stays up. The structure holds. You use 1/8 of a teaspoon per egg white. That's all. For 3 egg whites, that's 3/8 of a teaspoon. It sounds small because it is small. You don't need more. More just adds a sour taste that you don't want in your eggs, and it can start to affect the texture of the yolks. 1/8 per white is the ratio that changes the chemistry of the whites without changing the flavor of the finished dish. That's the number. Use it. Here's how you apply it. Crack your eggs and separate the whites from the yolks. Add the cream of tartar to the whites before you touch them with a whisk. Then beat them. Use a clean bowl. Any fat residue will prevent the whites from foaming properly. This is not optional. If you beat egg whites in a bowl that had butter in it an hour ago and you think wiping it with a towel is good enough, you will fail. Wash the bowl with soap and water. Use a metal or glass bowl, not plastic. Plastic holds onto fat molecules that you can't see. Beat until you hit stiff peaks. They'll be glossy and thick and they'll hold their shape when you pull the whisk out. That whole process takes about 2 to 3 minutes with a hand mixer and maybe 4 with a whisk if you're patient and consistent. The cream of tartar doesn't speed up the beating. It changes what happens when you stop. A stabilized white whips up into something that looks like a cloud. You can fold it into whole eggs for a lighter scramble. You can cook it low and slow and get a result that has almost no rubberiness because the protein structure is already locked in place by the acid. You can add it to a pan and get a disc that browns evenly and cuts with a fork cleanly instead of snapping like rubber bands. You can use it in an omelet where the whites and yolks cook at different rates normally, but with stabilization they move together. Hotels and restaurants don't talk about this publicly. You won't see it on their menus or mentioned in their reviews. But walk into the back of any serious breakfast kitchen and ask the line cook how they get their egg whites to hold a perfect, tall, stable foam for Benedict plates or omelets, and watch how many of them reach for the small container marked cream of tartar. They use variations of this technique. Some use a squeeze of lemon juice, which does the same thing but adds moisture and flavor that you may or may not want in your eggs. Some use a pinch of citric acid powder, which is the active component in cream of tartar isolated and sold in pure form. But cream of tartar is the kitchen standard because it's mild, it's predictable, it dissolves completely, and it comes in single serving shakers that fit in a cook's apron pocket. $1 for a container that lasts a year. The commercial food world doesn't advertise this because it doesn't sell a product. There's no corporation behind cream of tartar running a marketing campaign. It's a byproduct that costs almost nothing to produce and has been sitting in the same section of the spice rack for 50 years. The people who make eggs at home never got the sales pitch, so they never learned the technique. It's the same reason you don't see recipes for homemade garlic powder or onion flakes. Those things are things you can make yourself, which means the companies that sell them have no interest in telling you how easy they are to make. Cream of tartar works the same way. Nobody profits from you knowing about it, so nobody tells you about it. Now, the powder by itself will not fix every egg problem you have. It handles foam stability and protein structure. But you still need to handle heat, fat, and timing because those are separate problems. You need all 4 pieces: the cream of tartar, proper temperature, the right fat, and the right movement. Here is how to do that part right. Pan temperature for eggs should be medium-low. Not low, that won't cook them through without turning the heat up eventually and creating hot spots. Not medium, that's too hot for most of the cooking after the initial sear. Medium-low means you can hold your hand 6 inches above the pan and feel warmth without urgency. That puts your cooking surface around 275 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is where egg whites set slowly and evenly without browning too fast or seizing too hard. If you're using a heavy bottom pan, a cast iron skillet, or a stainless steel pan with some weight to it, it will hold temperature more consistently through the cooking cycle and prevent hot spots that overcook edges while the center is still soft. Thin pans are the enemy of good eggs because they swing temperature too fast when you add eggs to them. Butter is your fat. Unsalted butter if you can get it because you control the salt in the dish. Salted butter works fine if that's what you have. The amount is generous, at least 2 tablespoons for a 3-egg scramble. You want enough fat in the pan to baste the eggs as they cook, not just a smear on the bottom. When the butter foam subsides and you see the milk solid starting to brown, that's your signal to add your eggs. That browning is the Maillard reaction starting in the milk solids, and it's the difference between eggs that taste like something and eggs that taste like protein and fat. Don't miss that moment. The difference between white butter and brown butter in a pan is the difference between a flat egg and a flavorful one. Resting time matters in two places. Before cooking, let your separated egg whites with cream of tartar sit for about 2 minutes after you beat them to peaks. That rest lets the acid do its work on the protein structure and lets the foam stabilize further. Don't skip this. The 2 minutes is doing chemistry while you heat your pan. If you rush this step, you lose the stability benefit you built. Second place is during cooking. After you add your eggs to the butter, leave them alone for 30 seconds. Let them start to set on the bottom before you touch them. Then fold them with a spatula, not stir them. You're pushing the curds over on themselves, letting the uncooked portion slide underneath. Repeat every 20 to 30 seconds. 3 to 4 folds total for a 3-egg scramble. More than that and you break the curds into small, overcooked pieces. Less than that and the bottom overcooks before the top sets. Here is my method, start to finish. I want you to try this exactly once, and then adjust from there based on your pan, your stove, and your preferences. But try it my way first so you have a baseline. Take 3 eggs. Separate the whites from the yolks into 2 bowls. Add 1/8 teaspoon of cream of tartar to the whites. Beat with a hand mixer or a whisk until the whites hold stiff peaks. They should look glossy and stand up when you pull the whisk away. This takes 2 to 3 minutes with a mixer if they're at room temperature. Cold eggs beat up fine but slower. Room temperature eggs are easier to work with. If you forgot to pull your eggs out ahead of time, don't worry. They'll still work, it'll just take an extra minute. While you're beating, heat a heavy bottom pan on medium-low and add 2 tablespoons of butter. Let the butter foam and then start to brown slightly. You want to see the milk solid starting to turn tan, not black. If it smokes, your heat is too high. Set your beaten whites aside for 2 minutes. Don't skip this. Those 2 minutes are doing work that you can't rush. The acid is binding to the proteins and stabilizing the structure. Pour the yolks into the pan with the brown butter and stir them gently. Let them start to thicken slightly, about 30 seconds. Fold in the stabilized whites in 2 portions, half first, then the rest. Use a spatula and fold rather than stir. Don't press down on them. Fold the whites into the yolks as gently as possible. The goal is to keep as much air in the whites as you can. Aggressive folding pushes the air out and you lose the benefit you built. Put the pan back on medium-low heat. Cook for 90 seconds without touching it. Then fold once, gently. Another 60 seconds. Fold again. Another 60 seconds. By this point, the eggs should be just set. Soft curds that hold together when you push them with a spatula, but aren't dry or stiff. They should look glossy and slightly wet. Pull the pan off the heat and let it sit for 30 seconds. The residual heat will finish them without additional cooking and without the carryover heat drying them out. Plate immediately. What you have is a scramble with a completely different texture profile than what you get from the typical approach. The whites are lighter because they're aerated and stabilized. The yolks are creamy because they never got hit with high heat. The whole thing holds together on the fork and smells like butter and egg, which is what breakfast should smell like. This works for omelets too. Same process. Stabilize the whites, fold in the yolks, cook in brown butter on medium-low, fold gently, and roll out onto a plate. The difference between this and a typical omelet is that this one folds cleanly without tearing and has an interior that is not rubbery. A normal omelet browns too fast on the outside because the whites and yolks cook at different rates. With stabilization, they move together as one mixture. You get an omelet that is uniformly cooked and tender throughout. It works for poached eggs if you beat the whites with cream of tartar until stiff, wrap the yolk in the foam, and lower it into simmering water. The foam insulates the yolk and cooks the whites evenly around it. You get a poached egg with a runny yolk and a tender white that doesn't disintegrate in the water. This is a technique that hotel breakfast stations use for service when they need to plate dozens of poached eggs quickly. They stabilize the whites so they hold together under rough handling, and it works every time. The technique scales. 2 eggs, 6 eggs, 12 eggs for a hotel-style breakfast service. The ratio of 1/8 teaspoon per white holds at every scale. The resting time holds. The cooking temperature holds. You now know what hotels have known for decades, and nobody had to sell you anything to get there. No special equipment, no expensive ingredients, just $1's worth of powder that your grandmother probably had in her pantry and forgot about. If you try this and it changes your eggs, come back and tell me. I want to know what you got, what you adjusted, and what it tasted like. And if you know someone who's been making rubbery eggs for years, send this to them. They'll appreciate it more than you think. Most people don't know their eggs are supposed to taste different. They think what they're making is just how eggs are. It's not.